Remember, remember the 5th of November, gunpowder, treason and plot, for there is a reason why gunpowder and treason should never be forgot. While now is most likely known from the movie V for Vendetta, these words have been widely spoken in England for nearly 5 centuries and serve as a celebration of the Catholic rebel Guy Fawkes' failed attempt to blow up the Protestant-controlled English Houses of Parliament and commit regicide against King James I, all in one fell swoop on the 5th of November 1605. This night is still celebrated today in England on the 5th of November with traditionally a crude effigy of Guy Fawkes or even sometimes the Pope being burnt atop a giant bonfire before a great crowd as a stunning symbol of the power of the monarchy and Parliament in fighting Catholic-led uprisings. Although today the night is more well known as the Bonfire Night and is centred more around fireworks and activities for children, the Gunpowder Plot and treason has still had a significant impact on English history, with the actions taken in the aftermath still being visible in Britain today. This video intends to show how the Gunpowder Plot was one of the most significant events in English history, with it having long-reaching effects on the religious and political makeup of England, as well as an added impact on strengthening the monarchy and having a long-lasting impact on English culture. The Gunpowder Plot can probably be traced all the way back to 1534, before Guy Fawkes was even born, and to the reign of one of England's most famous kings, King Henry VIII. He is mostly known for having 6 wives, 2 of which he had arrested and beheaded, but it was his split from the Catholic Church that sowed the seeds of the Gunpowder Plot. There were several factors at play that made Henry VIII seek to end the authority of the Pope in England, but the most famous was his divorce to his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. There were several factors at play that made Henry VIII seek to end the authority of the Pope in England, but most famous was his divorce from his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. Henry sought a divorce for several reasons, namely because she had failed to give him a male heir. Catherine did give birth to Mary Tudor, who later reigned as Queen and was fondly remembered as Bloody Mary, mainly due to her massacres of English Protestants, and Mary remained the only heir she gave to Henry. At the time, having a single female heir was considered quite risky. England had never had a fully fledged queen at this point, and Henry was worried his dynasty would end with him if he failed to gain a male heir. At the same time, it is thought that Henry became infatuated with one of Catherine's courtiers, a woman named Anne Boleyn, who insisted on becoming queen if they were to have a relationship. This led to Henry appealing to the Pope to seek an annulment of his first marriage, which would leave him free to remarry. However, the Pope denied to grant the annulment, leading Henry VIII to begin a long, slightly boring and impactful journey of severing the Catholic Church's control over Christianity in England, and installing himself as the head of the Church of England. While the most famous, the annulment wasn't the only factor that led Henry down this path, but maybe we should save that for a different video. This split from the Catholic Church served to grow religious tensions within England after Henry's chief minister, Thomas Cromwell, went on a campaign to destroy nearly 800 Catholic monasteries and institutions in England following the break from Rome, and Henry becoming the supreme head of the Church of England. These religious tensions carried on following the reign of Henry VIII, with his first daughter becoming Queen Mary I, who famously became known as Bloody Mary due to her efforts at restoring Catholicism in her kingdom, and then later in the reign of her sister, Queen Elizabeth I, who reversed the work of Mary I and continued her father's Protestant rule, with the persecution of Catholics becoming widespread, with even a major Catholic figurehead in the British Isles, Mary, Queen of Scots, being executed. Eventually Elizabeth died, and her cousin King James IV of Scotland, also the executed Mary Queen of Scots' son, ascended the throne as King James I in 1603, 2 years before the Gunpowder Plot. However, despite James being born and baptised as a Roman Catholic, he continued with his predecessors' anti-Catholic policies and reinforced various laws against Catholics, including a fine for failure to attend Protestant church services, which went further to fuel discontent among English Catholics, especially because they probably thought King James I would reverse a lot of the anti-Catholic practices in England, which he failed to do so. This summarises the build-up of tensions within the Catholic communities in England and should go some way to help you understand why English Catholics felt an act of treason such as the Gunpowder Plot was necessary. While Guy Fawkes is often remembered as the main conspirator in the Gunpowder Plot, the actual conspiracy was led by an English noble and devout Catholic called Robert Catesby, who had been deeply affected by Catholic persecution from Queen Elizabeth and King James I. This ultimately pushed him into radicalism. Gatesby had already been involved in several Catholic uprisings before the Gunpowder Plot, notably the Earl of Essex's rebellion in 1601. However, after no notable change, Gatesby was pushed into forming his own conspiracy, recruiting fellow dissatisfied Catholics such as Thomas Winter and the famous Guy Fawkes. Gatesby had several aims in forming the Gunpowder Plot. The first and foremost was the assassination of King James I. The plan was to blow up the House of Lords during the state opening of Parliament, in which the King would be present. The hope was that committing an act of regicide in such a spectacular fashion would inspire a Catholic uprising across the country. This, coupled with his plan to somehow kidnap King James I's sister, Princess Elizabeth, and then installing her as a new monarch under the control of Catholics, would end the persecution against Catholics in England and restore a Catholic government similar to the rule of Mary I. This would be helped by the presence of several other leading Protestant figures in Parliament during the day of the Gunpowder Plot, including several members of the House of Lords, bishops, and members of Parliament, which in their deaths would ultimately create a power vacuum which English Catholics could capitalise on. The plan was set with a cellar that lay beneath the House of Lords being leased out by the group, where they began storing up an extraordinary amount of gunpowder under the disguise of storing firewood. Ultimately, they stockpiled 36 barrels of gunpowder over a period of months, which was more than enough to ensure the destruction of the building and the deaths of everyone inside. Due to his experience fighting for the Spanish Catholics in the 80 Years' War, Guy Fawkes was tasked with guarding the cellar and ultimately igniting the gunpowder when the time was right. However, as you probably know already, it didn't go as smoothly as planned. With the fear of accidentally killing several Catholic noblemen as collateral during the plot, a few of the conspirators grew uneasy and began sending out letters to Catholics who would likely be present on the state opening of Parliament alongside the King. One of these men was Lord Monteagle, who was just over a week before the state opening of Parliament received an anonymous letter which warned him to stay away on the day the plot was due to take place and requested the following: "Retire yourself into your country, where you may expect the event in safety." Whoever sent the letter essentially made a major mistake, as Lord Monteagle took this letter to the Earl of Salisbury, Robert Cecil, who was King James I's chief minister, and had been suspicious of Catholic activities for a while, so he took the threat very seriously and showed the letter to the King himself on the 1st of November. Following the warning, the King asked his Justice of the Peace, Sir Thomas Knivet, to search all of the premises beneath the House of Lords on the 4th of November. Despite searching all day, nothing was found, until their last inspection, where they came across an iconic-looking Guy Fawkes disguised as a servant pretending to guard a pile of firewood. Upon a further inspection, they found 36 barrels of gunpowder instead of firewood and arrested Guy Fawkes on site, finding matches and fuses in his possession, which made it clear that his intention was to ignite the explosives that had been stockpiled under the House of Lords. When arrested, Guy Fawkes gave the authorities a fake name, which very originally was John Johnson. He also refused to give any information on the plot or who his fellow conspirators were. News of Guy Fawkes' arrest and the failure of the Gunpowder Plot spread fast throughout England, with the next day, the 5th of November, becoming a celebration of the King's safety in the face of the Gunpowder Plot. The news also reached Guy Fawkes' fellow conspirators, including Robert Gatesby, who quickly fled London in an attempt to rally some kind of support from English Catholics in the countryside. After his arrest, Guy Fawkes was taken to the Tower of London to be tortured in the hopes that he would shed some light on the nature of the plot and tell them who his fellow conspirators were. Reports state that Guy Fawkes managed to survive several days of torture in the Tower of London without giving any details of his co-conspirators, which is some feat considering what we know about medieval torture practices. However, eventually Fawkes did disclose the details of the plot and the names of others involved, who were eventually either killed or captured following a manhunt that led them all the way to Staffordshire, with the main architect of the plot, Robert Gatesby, being killed in an exchange of gunfire. Now the surviving conspirators were all captured, they were brought to Westminster House to face trial in January of 1606, which gave King James I the opportunity to cement his authority and deter any future Catholics from attempting regicide again. The conspirators were accused of attempting to murder the king, attempting to destroy Parliament, and attempting to overthrow the government, which the persecutor, Sir Edward Coke, emphasised the gravity and serious nature of their crimes. As you can probably imagine, medieval courts didn't really have much of a reputation for fair trial, especially when there were those accused of attempting to murder the king. All the conspirators were denied legal representation and none had a proper defence, and an insurmountable amount of evidence was presented before them in the trial. This led to only one conclusion. All the surviving conspirators, including Guy Fawkes, were found guilty of high treason and sentenced to death, with a most brutal form of execution, being hung, drawn and quartered. As the king wanted to send a message and quell any potential future Catholic uprisings in England, the execution process was spread over 2 days, which also helped to extend the public spectacle and keep the masses entertained a bit longer. On the first day, 4 of the conspirators, Sir Everard Digby, Robert Winter, John Grant and Thomas Bates, were each hanged until nearly dead, and then cut down and disemboweled and then quartered into 4 parts before their heads were placed on spikes to serve as a warning. They were each done one by one, but luckily for Sir Everard Digby, he was allowed to go first as he was a nobleman. On the next day, Thomas Winter, Ambrose Rookwood, Robert Keyes and Guy Fawkes himself faced execution. However, Guy Fawkes didn't face the same fate as the others, either from being so weak following his torture in the Tower of London or as an act of defiance. Guy Fawkes either fell or leaped from the gallows, breaking his neck upon landing on the ground and dying instantly, saving him from a painful and drawn-out death. His body, however, was still quartered and the pieces were sent to various places around England to help serve as a warning to any would-be conspirators. The public nature of these executions helped serve a reminder for anyone thinking of committing treason that the Crown would respond with merciless punishment. It was also helpful and used as a means of unifying Protestants against what King James portrayed as a sustained and dangerous Catholic threat, with the failure of the plot and execution widely publicised in order to justify further harsh laws against Catholics, which brings us to the final part of this video. So, why was the Gunpowder Plot so significant? Well, other than being the most famous examples of a historical plot to throw down the English Parliament, kill the English and Scottish king and create a Catholic uprising in England, the Gunpowder Plot and its aftermath actually led to wide sweeping changes in England and potentially changed the makeup of the country going forward, with a vast wave of anti-Catholic laws coming into play. One such example is fines for recusancy, which is the failure to attend Protestant church services. These were increased, with enforcement also becoming more rigorous. The king also enacted a ban on Catholics living in or around London and were banned from holding public office unless they swore allegiance to the king over the Pope. The king also ordered restrictions on Catholic practices and education, meaning that effectively no one could practice Catholicism in public in England. These restrictions around Catholic life were coupled with an increased anti-Catholic sentiment in England, with the government using the Gunpowder Plot as an effective Protestant propaganda, using it consistently to depict a failed Catholic uprising against the king. There is also the spread of anti-Catholic conspiracy theories, with many assuming most Catholics in England were part of some secret shady cabal that was plotting to overthrow the king again. This growing anti-Catholic sentiment is prevalent throughout the 17th and 18th centuries and had widespread impact on future policies, even playing a major role in the English Civil War, with the tensions between Protestants and Catholics becoming one of the major sparks for it. And the final significance is, like I mentioned at the start, still today, on the 5th of November, families gather every year in England and usually find themselves heading towards a school or some kind of public field to view a giant bonfire with an effigy of Guy Fawkes burning bright on top. This tradition has been in place for over 4 centuries in England, with the story of Guy Fawkes still being told in schools and used as an example of failed uprising and cementing the strength and long-lasting nature of the monarchy in England, with still today the phrase being said by children and adults alike: "Remember, remember, the 5th of November, gunpowder, treason and plot, for there is a reason why gunpowder and treason should never be forgot." If you enjoyed this video, you might enjoy some of my other videos. I haven't posted in a while. This is the first video I've done, so it might be a little bit rusty. a little bit different to the other ones, so please take a look. You might enjoy them. Feel free to give me a subscribe, a like of the video, all that kind of stuff. Be greatly appreciated, and hopefully see you again next time.